we'll go there
Right.
in a moment too. And multicultural is no longer defined as Spanish language or Hispanic. It's broadening its appeal. And we like to believe that the two intersect and share from one another. And that's why we changed our name.
And that's a very good setup to, the next couple of slides. So basically, what we think is important is not where people came from. I mean, my background is Argentine and Hungarian, but, and
I
Trace.
grew up in upstate New York. So.
Right. So it's basically, it's important to understand what the different cultures that we have and what influences us, but it's also important to understand, like, what are our new ideas and where are we going? So, a common misperception is that Latinos are acculturating to America, speaking English, starting, to throw a football, but in fact, it's quite different. America's actually acculturating to Latinos.
Yeah, and you guys might not even notice
Right.
it, but we had tacos when we came here on Thursday. It's a Mexican thing, right? But it's become very much a part of American culture. And that's because we sampled something from another culture, we really liked it, and we brought it into who we are. And that sort of sets up what cultural
Right.
fluidity is. And we'll get into that a little bit more
And
now.
another example is even like communal eating. In the United States, that's something that just wasn't happening. Now you'll see in Brooklyn or in Los Angeles, you'll see big dining halls where groups are coming together, sharing ideas and eating together. So you get to see it in so many different ways. And honestly, I think that we don't know what's happening next, but what's great about working at the community is that we have several different perspectives that give us a better idea about what could potentially happen.
So we have people working at our agency from 40 different countries. We speak 9 different languages. And what we say here is interesting lives where cultures clash, and we really mean it. We share from one another every single day in everything that we do. And we have innate curiosity about every single one of us, from the interns to the president of the agency. We care because everyone's background will influence what we're producing on a day-to-day basis, but also the people we become, which is as important, if not more.
And Tracy has to handle all the different, questions that, the questions will come from very different backgrounds. So things about benefits and moving to this country and understanding Miami. Tracy's got to translate that into, several different, languages and cultures, and, thankfully, I think it's been working pretty well.
Yeah, but through that you learn. I mean, I didn't know that people weren't used to having to pay for their health insurance, as an example. I didn't know that in Argentina you get paid a net salary. Nobody knows what you're, so we have gross and net. In Argentina, they only have net. They only want to know cash in hand. I didn't know that until I started working here. And that is a really interesting new way of looking at things, which shapes a lot of the new policies that we have at our agency. Just one, obviously, small example.
So what we have here are some examples of ways in which you can see, like, the intersection of culture. So in Los Angeles, you'll have these what we call Anglo quinceañeras. So it's not just Hispanic girls that are having their, celebrating their 15th birthday. You're going to see, African Americans or, Anglo Americans also celebrating them. And, like, they pick and choose from different cultures.
Especially in Miami, you'll see that there's a very interesting sharing of cultures. So traditionally, when Cuban girls or Mexican girls or Hispanic in general turn 15, they have quinceañeras. Well, they're going to school with their American friends, and their American friends are saying, I want to party when I turn 15. So that's where this concept sort of grew up in Miami and Los Angeles, where you see the sharing of cultures more clearly.
Right. I had a bar mitzvah. I don't see, like, that happening with bar mitzvah.
I don't know. Stay away from my kids.
We're also seeing it in media. So, you'll see shows like Modern Family. The example here is the Afro-Latino Spider-Man. So, thankfully, people are understanding cultures, whether it's African American, Asian, and the, or Hispanic, and that intersection. Obviously, LGBT should also be considered within that as well. And this stat, I think everybody at a Hispanic agency has seen this about 1 billion times. But but what is it? There's 41 million
so in
bowls.
2 days, or tomorrow, I'm
Tomorrow.
Saturday. Tomorrow, how much guacamole will we all eat? You guys more in Oklahoma obviously have it, but now my parents from upstate New York that never heard of it before are like, can we get some guacamole? I'm like, sure.
And this is new.
Yeah,
this
it's
isn't
very
like
new.
it hasn't been since the beginning of the Super Bowl era. This is something that's directly influenced by the 17% of Latinos that are in this country.
And the sharing of cultures
Yeah.
between the people that you work with and you live next to and you see on the street and you ride public transportation with. It's learning and taking a little bit from every single person you meet every single day and having an appreciation for the differences.
So
this is all yours.
So this is a concept that we call cultural fluidity. And to be honest with you, it's something that we've come up very recently. We like to call ourselves experts in it, but we're not. We're still learning from it. We actually learned something, early, this afternoon that we could, potentially use within our presentations. So, basically the idea is that there's a common misperception and that, there is, the whole or general market and that minorities like live outside of it. And that's not, that's not true. I mean, and then the whole thinks, again, that minorities are on the fringe of it. But in reality, different segments go in and out of the general market, and different segments create the general market.
And even the general market goes in and out of those different cultures as well, and it really reshapes what general market is and redefines what general market is. It's not what it was even 5 years ago. I mean, general market speaks to people of many different religions and many different countries of origins and sexual orientations and religions. It's just everything.
And I think that, as advertising agencies, you're going to hear that there's, that we're trying to do things better. The thing is, there is a reality that advertising agencies in particular don't do diversity well. There was a recent study that showed that I think only 8% or 6% actually are African American within agencies. When it's 14% of the population, or Hispanics account for 17% of the population, but are only 8% of advertising agencies. So it's something that I think that we do it pretty well, but we also understand that we need to improve on certain aspects. So as an agency, we try to have an honest conversation and saying, okay, we're doing well on some fronts, but on others we just simply need to improve upon it.
Yeah, and we talk about it on a very organic level as we approach staffing up for new clients. We talk about the fact, and I mentioned before, that kind of innate curiosity for how other people were brought up and what their culture is. And that's reflected in our hiring practices. And I'm not going to get too much into it now because we want to show some of our work, which is fun, and then we'll get into a conversation about it. But it's really about being curious. It's really about wanting to surround yourself with people that aren't identical to you so that you can learn from them. It can help mold you into a better, more well-rounded person. Here we go.
So this is the spot that I worked on with a couple coworkers that you guys maybe have seen. We're giving you the uncut version, so it's a little bit longer than what you're going to see on television. So it's basically, I think that this is a great representation of how a different culture can bring an idea that can come to a fruition and resonate from the whole. So this is a spot called Dear Summer. It started out with a very simple idea of winter talking to summer. It sparked from actually an Argentine comedian, which then it became one of our ideas. And take a look and let us know what you think.
One more important thing that sort of started this whole cultural fluidity thing, we were tasked with producing a Spanish language commercial for Corona beer, and Corona is all about summer. So they wanted us to create something that was deeper than just the beaches that you see in a lot of their traditional advertising. Well, this became the general market spot, and it was originally supposed to only be a Hispanic Spanish language spot. No?
Play.
Dear summer, while you're out there enjoying the sun, I'm here shivering my icebergs off. And is it just me, or does the sun stay out way later with you? You have barbecue and bonfires. My fires are for, you know, not freezing. Forgive me for sounding jealous, but people could swim in your water. They slip and fall on mine. And do you know how many songs have been written about you? I have poetry. Fly dancing is a poetry. And your clothes. Don't get me started on your clothes. You even have your own hair. How am I supposed to compete with that? But you know what? People love you. And that's something I just can't argue. So let's hang out. You bring the beer and, well, I'll bring the ice. With warmest regards, Winter. P.S. Paul says hi.
So this is a spot that we did for Time Warner Cable. They asked us to promote their Penny International Long Distance Calling program. Seems kind of boring and that you can't come up with anything. And it was to be a total market spot. So they wanted to represent the audience that would be consuming the advertising. And this has actually turned out to be one of my favorites.
Yeah, and it's all about, you know, with different nationalities and cultures, there's, you know, different ways and different like relevancy in terms of how people connect with one another at different times. And, you know, I think it's a really beautiful spot. That's why I'm like always against it. It's like too much. Yeah, I think it gets both of them every time. I know it's kind of cheesy, but you know, I think it's the community spot. You know, it's very almost heart wrenching and emotional.
What's next?
So this is
okay.
yeah, Modelo. So I can set this up. This is a you know, what we tried to do with Modelo. Again, you know, we are in charge of the Hispanic marketing.
Yeah, we're multicultural agency of record for Corona, Modelo, and a beer called Victoria, which doesn't have a lot of distribution, but this is awesome beer, by the way. Anyways, I digress.
But we built the Modelo brand in, you know, having this workman-like atmosphere. And at first, I think Constellation tried to make it, you know, almost overtly, you know, hipster-like, because that's who we were trying to connect with. But then, you know, the idea and the concept of being a, you know, workman-like beer of the real world, it worked well. And it's not because the characters are Hispanic. It's because, you know, they embody the ideology of working hard. And so this is the spot.
In the real world, the most important rewards are not about what can be bought, but about what you're not willing to sell.
No, we have
See,
the
notice,
affordable beer.
the real world has its everyday rewards.
We have
Modelo
the
Especial,
affordable beer.
a beer true to its quality and taste since 1945.
So this is another
That's
spot.
what this is for. Anybody can take a guess. I
Right.
just,
Anyway, this spot, I think we were tasked to do a spot at a very, very difficult time. I don't think it's something that we were looking for to create work for the Affordable Care Act, or Obamacare. And at that time, the website wasn't working.
yeah, it was when it first launched.
Right.
So there was a lot of misinformation.
Exactly. So misinformation, a project that had a lot of negative attention towards it. You had to get a lot of different cultures to sign up. So the easiest way to do that is having cute, funny animals on the
Babies
spot.
or animals, it's always the way to get through a really complicated message.
You take care of us. Now it's our turn to take care of you.
That takes a lot of work, so you better stay fit. So sign up today,
Yeah. So listen to me. A talking heart, you see. If you get hurt, insurance preventive care is now free.
Sounds sweet.
Remember every budget, so don't accept defeat. Now you can get covered and still
Buy treats.
and whole. So come on, y'all, there's no time to waste. 'Cause we love you, we
It's the agency
can't
version.
say no to this space.
And you had to stay on the site for a long time, and then it closes. Animals work across cultures. That's for sure.
Yeah. And last but not least, I don't know that this has much to do with cultural fluidity. We had a conversation about it, but it's actually pretty cool.
It's been said that the best way to move forward is to try to learn from the past. Our roots give us character, but where we take them is what makes us, us. In the story of tequila, the first chapter was written by one man, Don Zenobio Salva, the father of tequila. The man that gave it its name and introduced it to the rest of the world. In the Great Fire of 1917, Don Salva's diary, a collection of his personal thoughts and ideas, is believed to be lost forever. But almost 100 years later, whether by fate or fortune, it was found again. His words inspired the creation of 1901. Old premium values remastered in a high-quality tequila. Because as Don Salva used to say, you can lead a horse to the water. That doesn't mean it's going to see its reflection. Maybe it translates better in Spanish. Enjoy.
So we have the outtakes.
Okay. So that campaign lived completely online.
And we had a bunch of different sayings that you'll see, and they're pretty humorous.
Because as Don Salva used to say, the bigger the man's dream, the more defeated he'll be in life.
He also just started running
Yeah,
with
he
it.
just started making up stuff as he went along.
And I think that this is the last one.
Because of Don Salzi's birthday, you know you celebrated responsibly. You're still able to spell responsibly.
Oh, there might be one more.
Oh. You can never get enough.
Because of Don Salzi
Right.
used to say, if you love something, set it free.
I think it's his. That's it?
And that's it. So we wanted to lighten it up a little bit before we get to what we really wanted to talk about, and that is diversity and inclusion and all of that. I think that, as I mentioned before, we are really lucky that we have so many different cultures represented in our office, and we learn from one another every single day. And I think it's because we have that appreciation for what those other cultures bring. So we like to think that makes our office more organically diverse. But the truth is that it's hard. And as you go and look for jobs, and as we as agencies look to hire people, we want to be representative of what the United States is in its general makeup. So at a leadership level at our agency, we talk about it all the time. And we try not to be forced about the way that we introduce inclusion into what we do every day, but it's certainly something that we keep in the back of our mind. So we all keep each other honest. So as we go through a meeting or as we have our bi-weekly leadership check-ins, one of the things we talk about every single time is how are we doing on hiring? Are we still making inroads in continuing to become more diverse as an agency? And can we do better, and how can we do better? And it applies to everything. It applies across the board. Our biggest challenge is in creatives. We have a lot of very strong creatives, and right now we only have 2 female creatives. Not great. We want to bring in a lot more because obviously it's not representative of what the United States is. So that's something that we're actively trying to do. And that's only one small example of the challenges that we have as an agency. And I know I speak for us obviously specifically, but I'm sure as you could talk to a lot of different people in this room that have been here this weekend, they can share a lot of the same stories because it's a very difficult thing to do. But we're trying to do it through our hiring practices and trying to make it a topic that's top of mind all the time.
Yeah. Couldn't have said it better.
Thanks. And I'll share with you an analogy that I came up with this morning. So for those of you that were in the room, I apologize for you hearing this again. But I remember me specifically, I grew up in a really, really small town in upstate New York, and I was very, very sheltered. I didn't really have exposure to a lot of different cultures and ethnicities and things like that. I went to college in Boston, and fast forward 5 years later and turning into the person I became. And that was because I had exposure to all of these different people, and I took a little bit from them, and it molded me into the person I became, which was much more well-rounded than the person I was when I was a freshman. And I think all of you probably have experienced a little bit of that in your time here at Gaylord and the University of Oklahoma. So that just shows that by surrounding yourself with people that look different, that may talk different, that grew up differently from you, all of those things that you can take from them make you a better person. And I sound super preachy, and I don't mean to sound preachy, but it's true. And having that curiosity and our responsibility as agencies and corporate America, quite frankly, is to allow for that exchange of cultures within the environments that we control.
I think that we just want to open it up to the group now to
Yeah.
answer any questions or just to have a discussion about diversity and inclusivity within advertising and PR.
Anyone?
I think strategy is taking the lead because you need the diverse perspectives. I think I'm seeing it more in strategy departments than elsewhere, but especially in the creative department of my agency, it needs a lot more diversity, and that's the only way to do breakthrough work is because if it's the same person creating it, it's going to become expected.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why we're here. One of the reasons we're here talking to all of you is the most sort of organic way to bring in people from different cultures and backgrounds is to bring them in at a relatively junior level through our internship program and junior positions, because they come in and they quickly assimilate to the agency culture, and through them we learn. I mean, Dan and I have been talking about how much we've learned as we've been here this weekend. And it's because we're meeting different people than we would have normally seen had we been in Miami for the last 2 days. It's a really good question,
Yeah.
and I think that quality is a interesting word, because I think that sometimes diversity in culture and background contributes to the quality of the work that they'll be able to bring. I think that that's always a discussion, especially in our creative department, because creatives like to, it's all about kind of connecting with people and getting portfolios of people you really respect, and it's like this weird cycle that's very difficult to break because you know the same people, they're in your same circles. I don't think so is my answer. I may have a different answer than some of my creative directors, though. It's
But
the truth.
I think it's also what we do is quality is a perception. So what we do is we bring in, people from different backgrounds to, state why they think, a creative or a strategist is going to be, better than another one. But yeah, in the end, it becomes a decision of who has, the best potential and the best work.
It's a great question. We haven't fully integrated is the first answer to your question. But the second answer is we're actually the shining star of diversity within the Sapient Health companies, because it's just sort of who we are anyways. So it wasn't really needing to make specific policy changes, because we can fill out those discrimination forms every quarter or whenever they're required, and we do it easily every single time.
For better or worse, we are the representation or the shining star of diversity.
Of diversity within Sapient, for sure.
I think that's what sets us apart. I think if we don't do that, we're not special. We're one of thousands of other agencies, and that's not to degrade the qualities that they have. I just think that's why a client will select us versus somebody else.
Yeah, I mean, we really believe, you saw the slide that says interesting is where cultures collide. We really believe that, and so for us, it's part of what makes us who we are. It's more complicated. because it's, your clients are asking you to do a pretty prescribed thing for the most part. I think that we encourage our creatives and all of the people within our agency to have pro bono projects that we all work on, and it's through those pro bono projects that we're able to affect change more directly than the work that we do for some of our paying clients. Although the good news is we're very upfront when we are approaching new pieces of business about what we think is important, and they know all of this about us. So they know that they're going to see that in the work that we produce.
And I can give you a specific example. I think that what we try to do is help them understand where they are on this, fluidity scale. So I won't name the client, but they were trying to put out a message to the African American community, and how they were wanting to position the message was basically celebrating themselves for all that or it was a message, maybe it wasn't celebrating themselves, but they were giving themselves too much credit for what they had done.
The client.
Yeah, and so what we try to do is tell them that, they really hadn't made much of an impact or much of, they really haven't tried to reach out to the African American community. So we said that they had to have like an introductory message, not something patting themselves on the back, but just, realistic. And from there, then they can build a, African American or a diversity platform, but they needed to start somewhere, and they thought they were a little bit ahead of where they actually were.
And that goes into the way that we work too, right? When we go into a new project, we assume that we don't know anything. And we try to impose those beliefs upon our clients, because it's an undertone of humility, I think, that allows us to produce some of our greatest work. If you go in sort of thinking you know how to reach the segment that you're targeting, you might be a little bit off because your gut may not align with the research and the insights. We try to do it the latter.
Mm-hmm.
We really try to produce one piece of content that will reach everyone. It doesn't work all the time, and it sort of depends on who you're working with and what you're trying to promote, but that's our approach. We truly believe in this concept of total market, and the fact that if we're able to present an idea with strong insights, it becomes somewhat culture agnostic, for lack of a better term.
But sometimes it's like, we try to think it one way, and then it just doesn't work. Like on TWC, like international calls and the relationship that an Asian American has or a Hispanic American has, they're just inherently different. Right. And so we had to have a spot that showcased the different relationships and different insights into like what goes into those conversations.
And celebrating it. I mean,
Yeah.
it goes back to that too. It's like we want to celebrate the differences as opposed to downplaying the differences.
I don't know. That's
It's a good question.
yeah.
I think that we try to have a ongoing conversation with people of different cultures. And we have several online panels that we have focus groups with on a regular basis. So we're constantly talking to people from different cultures, and it's through that knowledge that it helps shape some of the ideas that we have.
Yeah. I mean, frankly, a lot of times we don't know. So that's why we're very open to asking about how to approach certain things.
It's a great question. I mean, the truth of the matter is that we still work for companies that want us to sell more of their product. And they they know better than anyone else how to do that. So despite the fact that we may want to approach things more holistically, oftentimes we need to be a bit more prescriptive in the way that we do that. A great example is we may not think that you need to speak in Spanish to reach Hispanics. Many of our clients still think, and they have buys with the Telemundos and the Univisions of the world, so you have to produce content in Spanish. You have no choice.
But then, you're not reaching the right types of Hispanics. See, like Telemundo or Univision, 90% of their audience is unacculturated. While
Except in soccer.
in soccer, yeah. Or, there are individual shows that skew what we call bicultural. But, honestly, it's a battle that we have every single day. Because they do set, buys on Spanish language stations, but Hispanics are watching, shows like Modern Family or, Blackish is another show that Hispanics watch a lot. And it's just a perception among clients that think that this is what they're watching. You can convince them with data. That's the easiest way to do so.
And sometimes you lose, is the truth. And that's okay too, but we try to fight the battle. So we have mantras that we sort of stick to, and that becomes our focus for that year. Last year it was fight the good fight. And it was all about like making our point as much as we possibly can, knowing that sometimes we were going to lose, but at least they knew our point of view. This year it's no bullshit, which we'll see how that works. So far so good, but it's all about sort of presenting yourself in a very authentic way, and making sure that you show warts and all. So it's all about being true to who you are and what we are as an advertising agency.
Okay, well, let's give them a hand. Thank you. And we'd like to thank all of the presenters for being here. Thank you for taking time out of your workday and your weekend. We know how important those are. For being here, thank you all. Give yourselves a round of applause. It is Saturday afternoon at 1 o'clock, and you're sitting in here learning about your profession. Props to you guys. Hope you have a great weekend, what's left of it, and we'll see you back here bright and ugly on Monday. Thank you for joining us. Oh, before we leave, perhaps if we could get you upstairs, and Lindsay and Ask, we need about 15 minutes of time, and then we'll cut you guys loose, but we'd like to get some feedback. Thank you.
Oh, no, please.
Thanks for inviting us, and it's been amazing.
Thank you for everything, man. Thank you for the coffee.
Thank you for the opportunity.
Yeah, thank you for everything. I'm gonna be around. I think we're gonna go have lunch. So we'll be around.
That's a fantastic.
Smart man. Tell all your friends who didn't come here were in there.
Which way? This one?
Shame them. Exactly.
Absolutely. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
We signed to see what
Yes.
Sorry.
Where do you want us to go, upstairs?
Yeah, back up to the agency.
Okay.
Oh, thank you.
Just down from where you all were.
Okay.
Do that.
15 minutes of your time.
Perfect.
Sure.
Cut you loose.
Okay,
Great.
sounds good.
You got everything you need?
I think so, yeah.
We'll forget
I think
something.
so. That's okay. We'll get it next year.
Yeah.